Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiriduluale. The headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vows to retake Ukrainian territories in Donbass and Crimea. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov claims that Russia's main goal in Ukraine is to protect the breakaway self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. And UN officials warn that the war in Ukraine risks plunging millions of people into food poverty across the globe. We begin this morning with information from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's traditional nightly address, where he vowed to, quote, liberate the Russian territory of Crimea and the independent republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. He was speaking just hours after reports of the Ukrainian military shelling residential buildings, a marketplace, and a maternity center in the center of Donetsk. Mr. Zelensky said last night that his army would defeat its Russian opponents in eastern Ukraine and recapture the cities of Mariupol, Kherson, and Melitopol from Russia and the DPR and LPR forces. During his speech, he also said Ukrainians have been paying, quote, a very high price in ongoing battles in the Donbass region, describing them as one of the most brutal battles in Europe and for Europe.
We will welcome to Kherson, and ordinary Kherson residents will meet our army on the streets of the city. We will come to Melitopol, and we will return all Melitopol residents the opportunity to live without fear. We will come to Mariupol, and we will liberate the city for the third time. We will come to Enerhoda, and I want to repeat to everyone in the city who took to the streets against the Russian military, who refuses to cooperate with the occupiers, and who is waiting for us today. I want to repeat that we have not forgotten about our Enerhoda for a day.
І це означає лише одне: Росія ще в червні.
Meanwhile, Russia's RIA state news agency has cited Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov as saying that Russia's main goal in Ukraine is to protect the Moscow-backed republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. Mr. Peskov says in general, the protection of the republics is the main goal of the special military operation. Donetsk and Luhansk are two breakaway Russian-backed entities in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine, which Russia says it is fighting to remove entirely from Kiev's control. And Russian Defense Ministry spokespersons at a press briefing say the armed forces have destroyed a large number of weapons and military equipment delivered to the Ukrainian forces by the United States and some European countries. Igor Konashenkov says the Russian forces also destroyed a temporary deployment site for foreign mercenaries. The head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, Sergei Hedhar, says fighting in Severodonetsk continued overnight and Russian forces have taken control of a major part of the city.
High-precision air-based missiles near Udachna railway station in Donetsk People's Republic have destroyed a large number of weapons and military equipment delivered to a group of Ukrainian nationalists, including from the USA and European countries. In addition, temporary foreign mercenary deployment site near Fyodorovka, Lugansk People's Republic, and two batteries of multiple rocket launchers near Progress, Kharkov region, and Volchayarovka, Lugansk People's Republic have been destroyed.
Russia-backed separatist officials say that the death toll from yesterday's attacks on the Russian-backed self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic has grown to 5, while the number of injured has risen to 33. Separatist officials and Russian news agencies have reported several Ukrainian artillery strikes, including on a market. Russian news agencies later reported a shell had fallen on a maternity hospital in the city of Donetsk, triggering a fire and prompting staff to send patients to the basement. Earlier reports said 4 people died and 22 were injured. There's more on the situation in eastern Ukraine, the city of Severodonetsk, as the Luhansk governor has described it as extremely aggravated. Sergei Hedhar wrote on Telegram that the storming of the city has been going on for several days in a row, and each day people are killed, but their bodies are difficult to reach due to the density of shelling. Mr. Haidar added that there are many damaged high-rise buildings in the old districts of Severodonetsk, some of which the Russian army shot to demolish the foundations. And satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies shows damaged bridges around the city of Severodonetsk. The images, which were released overnight, displayed a number of destroyed and damaged bridges which link Severodonetsk to the nearby towns of Rubinsk and Lysychansk. A Ukrainian official says that Russian forces cut off the last routes for evacuating citizens from Severodonetsk as the Kremlin pushed for victory in the Donbas region. The governor, Serhiy Haidar, said the last bridge to the city was destroyed, trapping any remaining civilians and making it impossible to deliver humanitarian supplies, adding that 70% of the city was now under Russian control. Meanwhile, at least 3 people, including a child, have been killed and 4 injured today by what local separatist media say is a Ukrainian artillery strike on a market in Donetsk. Burning stores at the central Mesky market, and at least 1 body could be seen on the ground in Donetsk. Local news agency, the DAN, said 155mm caliber NATO standard artillery munitions hit parts of the region. Ukrainian officials have said an attack on a nearby residential block was carried out by the Russian military. President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly said the main immediate reason for what he casts as a special military operation was to protect the Russian speakers of the Donbas region from persecution and attack by Ukraine. Kiev says Russia's claim of persecution of Russian speakers is a baseless pretext for sending troops into the country. Staying in Ukraine, this video released by Ukrainian police today showed damage caused to residential buildings in the city of Bakhmut and other areas in Donetsk region following a Russian shelling. A resident in Bakhmut says the building he was in was shaking during Russian shelling, and footage showed shattered windows and scattered debris. A crater left by 1 shell in a road in Bakhmut was depicted in the images posted by the National Police of Ukraine. An unnamed officer said the police were documenting the consequences of the enemy's aggression. That's a quote. The province's news agency says at least 3 people, including a child, were killed and 4 injured yesterday by Ukrainian artillery at a market in the Russian-backed separatist Ukrainian region of Donetsk. Another report says calibers, which is a reference to standard artillery of NATO, hit parts of the region. The leader of the Russian-backed separatist Donetsk region of Ukraine, Denis Pushlin, says there are, quote, no grounds to pardon 2 British nationals and a Moroccan who were sentenced to death last week after being captured while fighting for Ukraine. A court in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic had on Thursday found Britain's Aydin Arslan and Sean Pena and Moroccan Brahim Sadoun guilty of mercenary activities seeking to overthrow the republic. Britain says Arslan and Pena were regular soldiers and should be exempt under the Geneva Conventions from prosecution for participating in hostilities. The pro-Russian separatists who control Donetsk say they committed grave fines and have a month to appeal. Donetsk and Luhansk are 2 breakaway Russian-backed entities in the Donbas region, which Russia says it is fighting to remove from Kiev's control. United Nations Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has spoken to the UN's Human Rights Council in Geneva about the havoc and destruction caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the consequential risks of plunging millions into poverty across the globe. According to the World Food Programme, the number of people living with severe food insecurity is expected to grow from 276 million at the start of 2022 to 323 million in the course of the year, with the poorest in society likely to suffer the most.
Strengthening fiscal systems can certainly help raise additional domestic resources in all countries. Finally, civic space, I wish to conclude on what I think is the most crucial and valuable element of building resilience in times of crisis. These are times for greater, not less, transparency and broader space for civic engagement and participation if we're serious about our commitments to build transformative and greener societies. A vibrant civic space is a lever of a stable, secure society. Yet we continue documenting attacks against defenders and journalists offline and online worldwide. We cannot separate progress on economic goals such as reducing poverty from the rights of those who are the intended beneficiaries of those developments, including the right of those people to be heard.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has hailed Sweden for taking important steps to meet Turkey's demands for approving Stockholm's NATO membership application. Sweden and Finland applied to join the alliance last month in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Their applications have faced unexpected opposition from Turkey, which has been angered by what it deems as Swedish support of Kurdish militants and by a previous decision to withdraw arms export licenses to Turkey. Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson says her country has changed its terrorism laws and is in the process of further tightening.
As you know, Turkey has raised concern in relations to Sweden's and Finland's applications, and we are taking them very seriously and have engaged in a dialogue together with Finland in order to find a way forward with Turkey.
I welcome that Sweden has already started to change its counter-terrorism legislation and that Sweden will ensure that the legal framework for arms export will reflect their future status as a NATO member with new commitments to allies. These are two important steps to address concerns Turkey has raised. The aim is to solve those issues as soon as possible, to be able to welcome Finland and Sweden as full members as soon as possible. Therefore, we are working hard and actively on these issues in close consultation with Stockholm, with Helsinki, and of course our NATO ally Turkey. And in that context, those signals from Sweden are important on terrorism and arms exports.
We have a much stricter regulation when it comes to financing of terrorism, and will also the 1st of July have even stronger legislation when it comes to the fight against terrorism. So here there are no questions about how strongly Sweden sees on terrorism, and that we are willing to contribute to the fight against terrorism.
If Sweden was attacked, then I deem it as unthinkable that NATO allies would not react. And that is a message that we have conveyed, the NATO allies have conveyed in a very clear way to any potential adversary. So seen from a security perspective, Sweden is in a better place now than before they applied. Then, of course, the aim is to, of course, take the next step, full membership, as soon as possible. But then we need to address the concerns expressed by Turkey. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quite a lot of moving parts. Let's talk to former Vice Chancellor of the Adekunle Ajasin University, Akugba Akoko in Ondo State, and now at the Department of Political Science at the Obafemi Awolowo University in Ile-Ife, Professor Olufemi Mimiko. Good morning. Thank you for your time today.
Good morning, Ladi. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to see you once again.
My pleasure, too. Thank you.
Before we get to what's going on the ground, two things seem to have happened, which one could describe as seismic events, depending on which side you're on. The first is that there seems to be a realism, some pragmatism, if you like, coming into the discourse. Yesterday, you had the NATO Secretary General saying that, look, it's quite possible that Ukraine would have to make some compromises, including in terms of territory for peace, for this war to end. That seemed to have been a shift from the position all along.